Imagine standing beneath a night sky so dark that thousands of stars blaze overhead, filling the heavens with mysterious shapes and silent lights. Long before cities, kingdoms, or written history, our ancestors looked up and saw more than stars. They saw animals, spirits, ancestors, and entire worlds hidden in the darkness. But where did these first legends come from? And why did nearly every culture on Earth create stories about the sky? Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy ancient mysteries, forgotten civilizations, and the hidden stories of our past. Tonight, we journey back to the very beginning of humanity's relationship with the stars. The night arrives without warning. There are no city lights glowing on the horizon, no distant roads, no illuminated windows, no aircraft crossing the darkness. A human being stands beneath a sky that appears far larger than any modern person can easily imagine. The land around them fades into shadow. Trees become silhouettes. Rivers disappear into blackness. The familiar world retreats. Above, however, another world awakens. Thousands upon thousands of stars emerge. The sky seems crowded with lights. A pale river stretches across the darkness from horizon to horizon. Today it is called the Milky Way, but for countless generations it had no scientific name. It was simply there, a luminous presence hanging overhead every clear night. To the people gazing upward, it may have appeared as a pathway, a wound in the heavens, a stream of souls, or something else entirely. The evidence remains incomplete. No written records survive from humanity's deepest past. Yet what survives in the archaeological and anthropological records suggests that the stars were never merely background scenery. Long before cities existed, before farming, before kingdoms, before writing, human beings were already looking upward. For most of human history, the sky was not an object of study. It was an environment. It surrounded life as completely as forests, rivers, mountains, and weather. The stars were present during migrations, hunts, births, deaths, and seasonal gatherings. Every generation inherited the same celestial canopy. Every child eventually looked upward and wondered what those lights might be. Somewhere in Africa more than 100,000 years ago, small groups of humans moved across landscapes that changed with shifting climates. Their days were consumed by survival. Food had to be found. Predators had to be avoided. Water sources had to be remembered. Yet even among these urgent concerns, the human mind possessed something unusual. It searched for patterns. This tendency is one of the defining characteristics of our species. Humans connect unrelated things into meaningful wholes. We see faces in clouds. We find shapes in random marks. We organize chaos into stories. When people looked at the stars, that instinct likely began operating almost immediately. Imagine standing beneath a perfectly dark sky with no modern distractions. Certain stars appear brighter than others. Some form striking arrangements. A curved line here, a triangle there, a cluster that resembles an animal, another that resembles a person. The patterns are not actually present in the sky. The stars involved may be separated by enormous distances, yet to the human brain they become connected. A story begins. No one knows who first imagined a constellation. No archaeological discovery can identify the exact moment when scattered lights became a bear, a hunter, a bird, or a spirit. Scholars still debate how early such symbolic thinking emerged. but evidence suggests that the cognitive abilities necessary for complex storytelling were already developing tens of thousands of years ago. One clue comes from caves. Across Europe, Asia, Africa, and other regions, ancient humans left images on stone walls. Some paintings date back more than 30,000 years. Animals dominate many of these scenes. Horses, bison, mammoths, deer, lions, and other creatures appear repeatedly. These paintings reveal minds capable of symbolism, memory, and abstraction. Some researchers have proposed that certain cave images may contain references to celestial observations. A few theories suggest that groups of dots near animals could represent star patterns. Others argue that specific creatures corresponded to constellations remembered by ancient communities. These ideas remain controversial. No single explanation fully accounts for the evidence. Many archaeologists urge caution because direct proof is difficult to establish. Yet even the debate itself reveals something important: the possibility that humans connected stories, animals, and stars reaches far deeper into history than many people realize. The night sky offered something rare in a constantly changing world. It was stable. Rivers shifted course, forests expanded and retreated, herds migrated, weather changed unpredictably. Human groups moved across vast territories, but many stars appeared in the same places year after year. Certain patterns returned reliably. Certain bright lights rose at predictable times. Even without formal astronomy, people could notice these rhythms. Over generations, observation became memory. Memory became tradition. Tradition became legend. The first legends about the sky were almost certainly not invented by isolated individuals. They emerged collectively. One person noticed a shape. Another connected it to a familiar animal. Elders repeated the story. Children learned it. The next generation modified it slightly. Centuries passed. The tale evolved. Eventually, nobody remembered when it began. This process happened long before writing could preserve exact versions. Oral traditions transformed continually. Stories adapted to changing environments and cultures while retaining ancient cores. Some legends recorded thousands of years later may contain fragments of ideas originating in unimaginably distant times. Anthropologists studying indigenous traditions around the world have found remarkable examples of cultural memory surviving across enormous spans of time. In some cases, stories preserve details about coastlines, volcanic eruptions, or environmental changes that occurred many millennia ago. The exact mechanisms remain debated, but such findings demonstrate that oral traditions can be far more durable than once assumed. If memories of landscapes can survive for thousands of years, it is not difficult to imagine that stories about the stars might endure as well. The sky encouraged this preservation because it offered a shared reference point. Every generation could look upward and see the same patterns. A mountain might be hidden beyond the horizon. A river might belong to a particular region, but the stars belong to everyone. At least they seem to. Yet even in humanity's earliest encounters with the heavens, a mystery was already forming. Different groups looked at the same stars and imagined entirely different worlds. One cluster became an animal in one culture and a hero in another. A bright star represented a spirit in one region and a seasonal marker somewhere else. The physical sky remained constant. Human interpretation did not. This reveals something profound about the first legends. They were never simply explanations of nature. They were reflections of human experience. Hunters saw hunters, coastal peoples saw creatures of the sea, pastoral societies imagined herds. Warriors imagined battles. Ancestors appeared among the stars because memory itself sought permanence. The heavens became a canvas upon which every culture painted its fears, hopes, and identities. And yet there was another reason the sky inspired such fascination. Unlike the ground beneath human feet, it seemed unreachable. People could walk across valleys and climb mountains, rivers could be crossed, forests could be explored, but the stars remained forever beyond reach. They appeared close enough to see yet impossibly distant. Their light shimmered in silence. They moved slowly across the darkness according to patterns that no one fully understood. For ancient observers, this separation may have suggested something sacred. The heavens became a realm apart, a place where spirits lived, a place where ancestors travelled, a place where powerful beings watched over the world below. Those beliefs would eventually shape religions, kingdoms, monuments, and entire civilizations. But at the beginning, before temples and priests, before calendars and astronomers, there was only a simple act repeated countless times across the ancient world. A human being looked up into the darkness. They saw points of light scattered across an endless sky, and for the first time, they wondered what story those lights were trying to tell. The darkness of the ancient world is difficult to reconstruct because almost nobody alive today has truly experienced it. Modern humanity lives beneath a permanent glow. Cities cast artificial dawns into the atmosphere. Highways stretch like illuminated rivers across continents. Even remote regions often show traces of human light. For most people, night has become a softened version of day. The world of our ancestors was entirely different. When the sun disappeared below the horizon, darkness arrived with astonishing force. Forests became black walls, valleys vanished. Familiar paths dissolved into uncertainty. Beyond the reach of a campfire, the landscape could disappear completely. Night was not merely an absence of light. It was an environment with its own rules, dangers, and mysteries. Yet as the earth darkened, the sky transformed. The stars emerged in numbers almost unimaginable to modern observers. Under truly dark conditions, thousands of stars become visible to the naked eye. The Milky Way shines brightly enough to cast faint shadows. Nebulous clouds drift across the heavens. Constellations stand out with remarkable clarity. The sky appears alive. For prehistoric communities, this spectacle was not an occasional experience. It was a nightly reality. Every clear evening offered a direct encounter with the cosmos. This matters because human belief systems do not develop in isolation. They grow from environments. Landscapes shape stories. Climate influences rituals. Geography directs imagination. The first legends about the sky emerged from people who spent their lives beneath an overwhelming celestial presence. The stars demanded attention. A hunter sitting beside a fire could watch them for hours. Travelers crossing open plains could use them as companions. Children listening to stories naturally associated those stories with the lights overhead. Night after night, year after year, the heavens became woven into the fabric of human existence. Archaeological evidence suggests that by at least 40,000 years ago, humans possessed sophisticated symbolic thought. Cave paintings, carved figurines, personal ornaments, and ritual objects reveal minds capable of abstract concepts. Such people were not simply surviving, they were interpreting the world around them. The night sky provided endless material for interpretation. Ancient humans lacked telescopes, mathematics, and formal astronomy, but they possessed something equally important: patience. Their lives unfolded outdoors. They spent far more time observing natural cycles than most people today. Seasonal changes, animal migrations, weather patterns, and celestial movements all became familiar through repeated exposure. Gradually, patterns emerged. Certain stars appeared shortly before sunrise during particular seasons. Others vanished for months before returning. Some clusters rose in the east at predictable times. The moon changed shape in a regular cycle. These observations required no scientific instruments. They simply required attention. And attention was something ancient communities had in abundance. The result was a world in which the sky seemed active rather than passive. Today many people think of stars as distant objects scattered randomly through space. Ancient observers often perceived them differently. The heavens appeared organized. Lights moved according to recognizable rhythms. The moon waxed and waned. The sun followed a path. Certain stars returned reliably. The sky behaved with purpose. At least, that is how it must have appeared. When humans encounter orderly behavior, they often search for intentional causes. A rustling bush might conceal an animal. Footprints indicate a traveler. Smoke suggests a fire. The mind evolved to identify agency because doing so improved survival. This same tendency likely influenced interpretations of the heavens. If movements appeared purposeful, perhaps something was guiding them. If celestial events followed patterns, perhaps those patterns carried meaning. If the sky seemed ordered, perhaps it reflected an unseen order beyond ordinary experience. Such ideas appear repeatedly across ancient cultures separated by vast distances and thousands of years. Different societies developed unique cosmologies, yet many shared the intuition that the heavens were not random. The roots of that intuition may stretch back into prehistory. One intriguing aspect of ancient skywatching is how profoundly it altered perceptions of scale. During daylight, human attention focuses on immediate surroundings. Trees, animals, rivers, and mountains define reality. At night, however, the horizon expands dramatically. The visible universe appears immense. For early humans, this experience may have been psychologically transformative. Standing beneath an endless sky encourages questions. What lies beyond those lights? Why do they move? Where do they go during the day? What happens after death? The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars cannot directly recover the thoughts of prehistoric individuals. Yet anthropological comparisons suggest that many traditional societies connected celestial phenomena with broader questions about existence, origins, and destiny. The stars became more than objects. They became symbols. Some of the oldest surviving mythologies recorded thousands of years later describe the heavens as pathways. Souls travel along them. Ancestors reside among them. Divine beings move across them. Although these accounts originate from much later periods, they may preserve echoes of far older ways of thinking. Darkness itself contributed to these beliefs. Night alters perception. Familiar landmarks disappear. Sounds become more noticeable. Distances become uncertain. Imagination fills gaps in knowledge. Around campfires, stories gain power. Flickering flames create moving shadows. The boundary between ordinary reality and the unseen feels less secure. Under such conditions, the sky acquires emotional significance. A bright star may feel protective. An unexpected meteor may seem ominous. A full moon can transform entire landscapes. Ancient communities experienced these phenomena directly, without scientific explanations to soften their mystery. Meteor showers provide a good example. Today they are understood as particles burning in Earth's atmosphere. To ancient observers, They may have appeared as celestial messages, supernatural signs, or manifestations of powerful beings. Similar reactions likely accompanied eclipses, comets, and other unusual events. The heavens were not silent. They occasionally behaved in startling ways, and when they did, people remembered. Memory is crucial because myths rarely emerge from ordinary events alone. They often form around moments that feel extraordinary. A brilliant comet visible for weeks, a meteor blazing across the sky, a blood-red lunar eclipse. Such experiences leave deep impressions. Generations later, the event may survive only as a story. The original observation fades. The meaning remains. Some researchers suggest that ancient myths occasionally preserve memories of real astronomical phenomena. Certain traditions may contain references to comets, supernovae, or unusual celestial alignments. Identifying these connections is challenging, and many proposed examples remain disputed. No single explanation fully accounts for the evidence. Yet the possibility highlights the intimate relationship between observation and storytelling. The first legends about the sky did not emerge from ignorance. They emerged from engagement. Ancient people watched carefully and they noticed details. They tracked changes and they remembered patterns. Their explanations differed from modern scientific interpretations, but the observations themselves were often remarkably accurate. This distinction is important. The creators of early sky myths were not passive dreamers staring into the darkness. They were skilled observers attempting to make sense of a vast and mysterious universe with the tools available to them. And as generations passed, one particular habit became increasingly significant. People began connecting individual stars into meaningful shapes. What started as scattered points of light gradually transformed into animals, spirits, heroes, and creatures that existed nowhere except in the imagination. The heavens were becoming a gallery of stories. Soon, entire worlds would be written across the night sky. The stars themselves never changed, at least not in any way visible within a human lifetime. Night after night, generation after generation, the same bright points returned to the sky. Their positions shifted slowly across the seasons, but the larger patterns remained familiar. To ancient observers, this stability gave the heavens a quality unlike anything else in the natural world. Rivers flooded, trees died, animals migrated, entire landscapes could transform under changing climates. Yet the stars seemed eternal. The human mind responded by doing what it does best. It created order. Somewhere in prehistory, perhaps many times in many different places, people began connecting separate stars into recognizable forms. The process was natural. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. Presented with scattered points of light, they searched for shapes that already existed within their experience. A curved arrangement might resemble antlers. A cluster could become a bird. 3 bright stars in a line might suggest a hunter's belt or a spear. Once a shape was imagined, it became difficult not to see it. This tendency remains familiar even today. People see faces in rocks, animals in clouds, and figures in shadows. The phenomenon is so deeply rooted in human cognition that psychologists have identified it across cultures. The brain constantly organizes visual information into meaningful structures. The night sky offered an almost perfect canvas for this instinct. What makes the earliest constellations especially fascinating is that they were not merely visual inventions. They became repositories of memory. A pattern in the stars could carry information. A story attached to that pattern made it easier to remember. This transformed the heavens into something far more useful than decoration. Imagine a group of hunter-gatherers moving through a seasonal landscape. Survival depends upon timing. Certain animals appear during specific periods of the year. Particular plants become edible for only a short time. Rivers rise and fall. Weather shifts. Knowing when these changes will occur can mean the difference between abundance and hardship. The stars offered clues. As Earth moves around the Sun, different portions of the night sky become visible during different seasons. Certain constellations rise before dawn at particular times of year. Others dominate the evening sky during specific months. Ancient observers could notice these recurring patterns. If a familiar star group appeared shortly before a migration of game animals, the connection became memorable. If another constellation coincided with a seasonal gathering or a period of abundant food, it gained significance. Over generations, practical knowledge merged with narrative tradition. The constellation became a calendar. The calendar became a story. The story became sacred. Evidence from traditional societies around the world demonstrates how deeply such systems could become embedded within culture. Indigenous groups in Australia, Africa, North America, and elsewhere often link celestial patterns with ecological knowledge. Stories about stars were not simply entertainment. They contained information about seasons, navigation, animal behavior, and social obligations. Some of these traditions survived into the modern era, offering rare glimpses into ways of thinking that may resemble much older prehistoric practices. One particularly intriguing example involves what astronomers call dark constellations. Most people today think of constellations as arrangements of bright stars. Yet some cultures identified shapes within the dark regions of the Milky Way itself. Instead of connecting points of light, they recognized forms hidden within the darkness between them. Among several indigenous Australian traditions, a giant celestial emu stretches across dark dust clouds within the Milky Way. This figure is not created by stars but by their absence. During particular seasons, its position in the sky corresponded with the behavior of real emus on the ground, providing valuable ecological information. The sophistication of such observations is remarkable. It suggests that ancient sky watchers paid attention not only to the brightest objects, but to subtle details many modern observers overlook entirely. The evidence remains incomplete regarding how far back such traditions extend, yet they reveal an important principle. The first celestial legends were often rooted in close observation rather than pure imagination. Story and knowledge worked together. As humans spread across the globe, this process unfolded in countless different environments. Communities living near coasts imagined sea creatures among the stars. Groups inhabiting grasslands saw animals central to their daily lives. Forest peoples envisioned beings shaped by wooded landscapes. The heavens became culturally local despite being universally visible. This created one of the great paradoxes of human history. Everyone shared the same sky. Nobody shared exactly the same stories. A bright cluster visible above one continent might represent a sacred bird, thousands of kilometers away. Another culture interpreted the same stars as a hunter, a canoe, or a mythical ancestor. The physical arrangement remained unchanged. Human meaning transformed endlessly. Scholars still debate whether some constellations may have extraordinarily ancient origins. Certain star patterns appear in remarkably different cultures separated by vast distances. This raises an intriguing possibility. Could a few celestial stories trace their roots back to populations that existed before major human migrations? The question is difficult to answer. Human beings have often arrived at similar interpretations independently. Shared cognitive tendencies can produce similar myths without direct contact. A grouping that resembles an animal in one region may naturally evoke comparable imagery elsewhere. Even so, a handful of researchers have suggested that some constellation traditions could preserve fragments of stories tens of thousands of years old. The evidence remains controversial. No single explanation fully accounts for the similarities. Yet the possibility continues to fascinate scholars because it hints at a form of cultural continuity stretching back toward humanity's earliest chapters. Whether or not such ancient connections exist, there's little doubt that constellations became powerful memory devices. The night sky functioned like an enormous archive. Unlike spoken words, stars could not be forgotten easily. Unlike carvings or paintings, they required no physical materials. Every clear night restored the same celestial map. Elders could point upward and teach stories directly from the heavens themselves. A child learning a constellation was not merely memorizing a shape. They were inheriting knowledge. They were learning when certain animals migrated. They were learning community traditions. They were learning relationship between people, land, and sky. Most importantly, they were learning how their culture understood the universe. This educational role may help explain why celestial stories became so resilient. Valuable knowledge tends to survive. When practical information is embedded within memorable narratives, it becomes easier to transmit across generations. The stars provided a perfect framework for such transmission. Yet as humans became increasingly skilled at recognizing patterns overhead, another development followed naturally. The shapes in the sky began acquiring personalities. Animals became more than animals. Figures became more than figures. Constellations started acting within stories. They hunted, traveled, fought, died, transformed, and returned. The heavens were no longer simply a collection of patterns. They were becoming populated. An invisible world of beings was taking shape above the earth, one that would eventually influence myths, religions, and civilizations across the ancient world. And among the first inhabitants of that celestial realm, animals would play an especially important role. Long before kings traced their ancestry to the heavens, before priests recorded celestial omens on clay tablets, and before astronomers measured the movements of planets, the night sky belonged to animals. This was hardly surprising. For most of human history, animals occupied the center of human existence. They provided food, clothing, tools, dangers, and companionship. Hunters followed their migrations. Communities studied their behavior. Entire survival strategies depended upon understanding them. In many ways, ancient people knew animals more intimately than they knew other human societies beyond their immediate horizons. When they looked upward and searched for familiar shapes among the stars, animals naturally appeared first. The heavens became populated with creatures both real and imagined. Some resembled animals encountered every day. Others combined features from several species. A few evolved into supernatural beings whose forms shifted across generations of storytelling. The precise details differed from culture to culture, but the pattern itself was widespread. Humans understood the unknown through the familiar. The sky was unknown. Animals were familiar. The connection was almost inevitable. One reason animals prove so useful in celestial storytelling is that they carried meaning beyond their physical forms. A predator represented strength. A bird symbolized freedom or movement between worlds. A serpent suggested danger, transformation, or hidden power. These associations emerged repeatedly in different parts of the world, though not always in identical ways. As a result, animal constellations became more than visual patterns. They became symbols. Consider birds. Across many ancient traditions, Birds occupied a special place because they moved through regions inaccessible to humans. They soared above mountains, crossed vast distances, and vanished into the sky itself. To people who spent their lives on the ground, birds appeared to travel between earthly and celestial realms. It is therefore unsurprising that many cultures connected birds with spiritual journeys, divine messengers, or pathways to the heavens. The stars provided a natural home for such creatures. Similarly, serpents emerged as powerful celestial symbols in numerous societies. Their ability to shed skin suggested renewal and rebirth. Their movements seemed mysterious. Some lived underground, others inhabited water. Many inspired both fear and respect. When serpentine forms appeared among the stars, they often acquired cosmic significance. Large celestial snakes wound across the heavens in stories separated by thousands of kilometers and many centuries. Whether these similarities arose independently or through ancient cultural exchanges remains uncertain. Scholars still debate the origins of many serpent myths, yet their persistence highlights the enduring power of certain animal archetypes. Among hunter-gatherer societies, large mammals frequently occupied central positions in both life and legend. The reasons were practical. Large animals provided substantial food resources. Their migrations shaped seasonal movements. Their behavior demanded careful observation. Hunters developed deep knowledge of their habits, tracks, and habitats. Over time, respect and dependence often evolved into mythology. Animals became teachers. Animals became ancestors. Animals became supernatural beings. The boundary between natural and spiritual categories was often far less rigid than modern people might expect. Anthropologists studying traditional societies have repeatedly encountered cosmologies in which humans and animals share common origins. In some stories, animals once spoke. In others, they transformed into people, or vice versa. Certain creatures possessed wisdom unavailable to ordinary humans. When such beliefs intersected with celestial observation, animals naturally ascended into the sky. The heavens became a vast stage where important beings could remain visible forever. One particularly fascinating aspect of ancient sky legends is how they preserved ecological relationships. Predators pursued prey across the stars. Birds followed seasonal paths. Animals associated with particular times of year appeared in corresponding regions of the sky. These connections helped transform celestial myths into practical knowledge systems. A constellation was easier to remember if it participated in a compelling story. A story was more useful if it encoded environmental information. Over countless generations, narrative and observation became inseparable. What survives in the ethnographic record suggests that many star traditions functioned simultaneously on several levels. A constellation could represent an animal, teach a moral lesson, mark a season, and reinforce community identity all at once. Modern distinctions between science, religion, and storytelling often fail to capture this complexity. For ancient peoples, these categories frequently overlapped. The stars did not belong exclusively to any single domain of thought. They connected everything. Some of the most intriguing clues regarding early celestial animals emerge from cave art. Certain Paleolithic sites contain remarkable images of creatures painted with extraordinary care. Bison, horses, lions, mammoths, deer, and other animals appear repeatedly. Scholars generally interpret these works within the context of hunting, ritual, symbolism, or social identity. Yet a minority of researchers have suggested that some compositions may contain astronomical elements. These interpretations remain controversial. For example, several scholars have proposed that specific animals correspond to star groups or seasonal markers. According to such theories, cave paintings may preserve information about celestial observations alongside other meanings. Critics argue that the evidence is often speculative and difficult to verify. The debate remains unresolved. No single explanation fully accounts for all available evidence. Nevertheless, the discussion highlights an important reality. The relationship between animals and the sky may have deeper roots than written history can reveal. If ancient communities were already associating creatures with celestial patterns tens of thousands of years ago, then some of humanity's earliest legends may have emerged during periods far beyond the reach of historical records. That possibility introduces both excitement and caution. Excitement because it hints at astonishing continuity across immense spans of time. Caution because direct proof remains elusive. The earlier stories vanished long ago. What survives are fragments, echoes, and indirect clues. Yet even fragments can reveal surprising things. One recurring theme across many ancient cultures involves celestial animals acting as guardians or guides. They help souls navigate the afterlife. They protect sacred pathways. They mark boundaries between worlds. These motifs appear in different forms across continents separated by oceans and millennia. The similarities do not necessarily indicate common origins. Human beings often develop comparable ideas independently when confronted with similar experiences. Even so, such patterns suggest that animals fulfilled universal psychological roles within celestial mythology. They made the sky understandable. The heavens were vast, distant, and mysterious. Animals provided familiar points of reference. Through them, humans transformed an overwhelming cosmos into a narrative landscape. The stars ceased to be anonymous lights. They became participants in stories. And stories possess a remarkable ability to endure. A child learning about a celestial bird or cosmic deer was not simply memorizing a constellation. They were inheriting a worldview. They were learning how their community understood nature, time, life, and death. The sky became a classroom. Its lessons unfolded night after night. Yet animals alone could not explain everything overhead. Certain patterns seemed useful in ways that went beyond storytelling. Particular stars appeared at predictable times. Certain celestial movements corresponded with changes on the earth below. Gradually, people began realizing that the heavens offered something more than myths. They offered guidance. The same stars that inspired legends could also help determine when to travel, where to go, and how to survive in unfamiliar landscapes. The night sky was becoming a map, and that discovery would transform humanity's relationship with the stars forever. At first, the stars were stories. Then they became tools. This transformation did not happen suddenly. No single individual looked up one night and invented celestial navigation or seasonal astronomy. The process unfolded gradually across thousands of years as countless generations accumulated observations. Each small discovery added another layer of meaning to the sky. The result was one of the most important intellectual developments in human history. People began realizing that the heavens could help them survive. For communities living in prehistoric landscapes, survival depended heavily on timing and movement. Food sources appeared and disappeared. Herds migrated across enormous distances. Rivers changed with seasonal rains. Coastal resources fluctuated throughout the year. Knowing when and where these changes would occur could determine whether a community prospered or struggled. The stars offered reliable clues. Unlike weather, which could vary unexpectedly, celestial cycles followed predictable patterns. Certain star groups appeared in the evening sky during particular seasons. Others rose just before dawn at key moments of the year. The moon followed its own rhythm. Together, These recurring phenomena created a celestial calendar visible to anyone willing to observe it carefully. Ancient people did exactly that. One of the most significant observations involved what astronomers call heliacal rising. This occurs when a star or constellation becomes visible just before sunrise after a period of absence from the night sky. Such events often coincide with seasonal transitions. Without scientific terminology, ancient observers could still recognize the pattern. A particular star disappeared. Months passed. Then it returned just before dawn. Soon afterward, familiar environmental changes followed. Perhaps rains arrived. Perhaps fish gathered near river mouths. Perhaps migrating animals appeared. Perhaps certain plants became ready for harvest. The exact details varied by region, but the principle remained remarkably consistent. The heavens provided advance notice. This practical value helped ensure that celestial knowledge was remembered and transmitted. Stories about stars were not merely entertaining. They contained information essential for community survival. A constellation associated with a hunting season could remind people when game animals would return. A celestial bird might signal the arrival of spawning fish. A group of stars connected with rainfall could help predict agricultural opportunities in later societies. Mythology and observation reinforced each other. The story made the pattern memorable. The pattern made the story useful. Anthropologists studying indigenous knowledge systems have repeatedly encountered sophisticated examples of this relationship. In many traditional cultures, celestial narratives serve as ecological calendars. They encode generations of environmental observation within memorable oral traditions. What sometimes appears to outsiders as simple folklore often contains remarkable practical knowledge. This realization has changed how many researchers approach ancient myths. For centuries, scholars frequently treated traditional sky stories primarily as symbolic or religious creations. More recent research suggests that many also functioned as information systems. They preserved observations about landscapes, seasons, animals, and weather patterns accumulated over long periods. The stars became a library written not on paper but across the sky itself. For highly mobile hunter-gatherer groups, celestial knowledge offered another advantage. Direction. Travel posed enormous challenges in prehistoric environments. Vast grasslands, deserts, forests, and coastlines stretched across unfamiliar territories. Landmarks could disappear. Trails might be lost. Seasonal migrations often required movement across great distances. The heavens provided consistency. During clear nights, certain stars maintained fixed relationships to one another. Some appeared to circle around stable points in the sky. Others followed recognizable paths. People who paid attention could use these patterns for orientation. Long before compasses existed, celestial navigation helped humans move through landscapes. The evidence for the earliest use of such techniques remains incomplete. Archaeologists rarely recover direct proof of navigation methods from deep prehistory. Yet ethnographic evidence from later traditional societies demonstrates that sophisticated celestial navigation developed in many parts of the world. Perhaps the most astonishing examples emerged among oceanic peoples. Although these traditions belong to much later periods than the earlier star legends, they reveal what human observation could achieve without modern technology. Skilled navigators memorize star paths, ocean swells, winds, and other environmental cues to cross immense distances across open water. They transform the sky into a map. The intellectual foundations of such achievements likely rested upon observational habits developed over far longer timescales. The same curiosity that inspired myths also encouraged careful tracking of celestial movements. Over generations, observation became increasingly detailed. Ancient people noticed that not all lights behaved identically. Most stars maintained stable relationships with one another, yet a handful of bright objects wandered through the sky. These wandering lights would later become known as planets. For now, however, they remained mysterious anomalies. Their unusual behavior attracted attention because it disrupted familiar patterns. A constellation remained recognizable year after year. A wandering light moved differently. Something strange was happening. The first observers could not know that they were watching neighboring worlds orbiting the sun. Yet they clearly recognized that these objects behaved differently from ordinary stars. The heavens were becoming more complex. Every new observation generated fresh questions. Why did some lights wander? Why did others remain fixed? Why did certain stars disappear and return? Why did celestial patterns repeat so reliably? Ancient myths often emerged in response to such mysteries. Stories provided frameworks for understanding phenomena that lacked obvious explanations. Importantly, these stories were not necessarily viewed as separate from observation. Modern culture often contrasts myth and science as opposites. Ancient worldviews rarely drew such sharp distinctions. A story about a celestial animal might simultaneously explain a seasonal event, preserve navigation knowledge, and express spiritual beliefs. Multiple layers of meaning could coexist comfortably. This flexibility made oral traditions extraordinarily resilient. As communities spread into new environments, celestial stories adapted accordingly. Existing star patterns acquired new associations. Familiar constellations connected with local animals or ecological cycles. Yet the sky itself remained recognizable. The same stars watched over deserts, forests, mountains, grasslands, and coastlines. This universality gave celestial knowledge unusual durability. Languages changed. Technologies evolved. Populations migrated. The stars endured. Over immense spans of time, these observations accumulated into increasingly sophisticated systems of understanding. Some communities tracked seasonal changes with remarkable precision. Others developed complex ceremonial traditions linked to celestial events. Gradually, the heavens became woven into every aspect of life. The process was so gradual that no one could have recognized its long-term consequences. A hunter memorizing seasonal stars was participating in a tradition that would eventually contribute to calendars. Calendars would support agriculture. Agriculture would support cities. Cities would support priesthoods, kingdoms, and monumental architecture. The road towards civilization would pass beneath the stars. Yet before celestial knowledge became associated with rulers and institutions, it acquired a more intimate role. The heavens were no longer merely guides for travel and survival. They were becoming homes. The dead, the ancestors, the remembered figures of the past increasingly seemed to belong among the stars themselves. Above the practical sky of navigation and seasonal knowledge, another sky was taking shape. A spiritual sky, a realm where human memory reached upward into the darkness and transformed distant lights into eternal presences. As people observed the stars night after night, they began to attribute more than practical significance to the lights above. The first legends that envisioned stars as spirits, ancestors, heroes, and other beings emerged from this intersection of observation, memory, and imagination. In many of the earlier societies, the sky became populated with invisible presences projected from human experience, yet taking on lives of their own. No written records preserve the first iterations of these ideas. What survives are fragments of stories, artifacts, and enduring motifs repeated across the millennia. These fragments suggest that humans long ago felt the stars were active participants in the world, not passive decorations. The creation of celestial personifications was not arbitrary. Certain bright stars were singled out because of their visibility, steadiness, or timing. A star that appeared prominently at dusk or dawn could mark the arrival of the dry season, the migration of prey, or the beginning of a ritual period. A slowly wandering light might represent a journeying ancestor or an unpredictable spirit. Patterns and behavior provided a natural foundation for the imagination. Communities drew meaning from repeated observation. Story and survival intertwined. Oral traditions encoded these ideas. Elders recounted tales in which stars were the embodiment of ancestors watching over the living, guiding or warning, or even punishing human behavior. Some myths described entire constellations as the deeds of heroic figures or legendary animals whose adventures explain the movements of celestial bodies. One constellation might hunt across the sky while another watched or hid. Certain stars were immortalized as children lost, animals transformed, or heroes elevated to divine status. The richness of these stories allowed them to carry lessons, ecological knowledge, and communal memory simultaneously. What survives in the record suggests that narrative and practicality were inseparable. Sacred landscapes reinforced these beliefs. Mountains, rivers, caves, and rock shelters often became focal points for communal gatherings and observation. Fires, smoke, and the echo of voices under open skies created atmospheres that amplified the sense of the cosmos as alive. Early communities may have timed seasonal ceremonies to correspond with the rising or setting of key stars. Rituals linked to hunting success, fertility, or the marking of time often reference celestial phenomena. These practices ensured that stories about the heavens were repeatedly reinforced in social and physical space, embedding them deeply in cultural memory. This combination of observation, myth, and place created an enduring structure. The first celestial legends were grounded not just in imagination, but in experience. They evolved from direct engagement with a world dominated by darkness and disilluminated by uncountable points of light. They offered explanations for the unknown, encoded vital knowledge about the environment, and connected communities across generations. The heavens were more than a backdrop. They became a narrative stage on which human experience was dramatized and made comprehensible. Yet the sky also presented enigmas that defied easy explanation. Planets, comets, meteors, and other celestial anomalies moved differently from the fixed stars. Their irregular paths challenged early observers' expectations. Such objects were imbued with special significance, often interpreted as omens, harbingers of change, or messages from unseen forces. Stories about these wandering lights emphasized unpredictability and power. They formed a counterpoint to the constellation's stability, reminding observers that the heavens were at once familiar and mysterious. Human curiosity, awe, and the need to explain converged, giving rise to the first cosmic narratives that combined order and anomaly, the mortal and the divine. Through these early legends, the sky became a mirror of human thought and culture. Observers projected onto the stars the stories, fears, and hopes of their communities. They encoded their knowledge of the environment into stories that could survive beyond the lifespans of individuals. Each legend contributed to an emerging worldview in which the cosmos was alive, connected, and intelligible yet vast and unknowable. Ancestors, heroes, animals, and spirits all found residence among the stars. These first personifications of the heavens were the earliest attempts to reconcile human experience with the overwhelming immensity of the night sky, and in doing so, They laid the foundation for millennia of celestial storytelling that would shape every corner of human civilization to come. The stories did not live in the sky alone. They lived on the ground, in places where people gathered, remembered, and returned generation after generation. A constellation could only become meaningful if someone taught its story. A celestial ancestor could only remain alive in memory if communities continued speaking of them. The stars offered a canvas, but the landscapes of Earth provided the stage upon which those stories were preserved. Long before temples rose from stone and long before organized priesthoods formalized religious traditions, there were mountains. There were caves. There were rivers. There were open plains where fires burned beneath immense skies. These places became natural meeting points between the human world and the celestial one. Across many ancient cultures, elevated locations acquired special significance. The reason may seem obvious today. A hilltop provides a wider view of the horizon. A mountain peak appears closer to the heavens. Yet practical advantages alone do not fully explain the powerful symbolic role such places acquired. To people living without modern scientific explanations, height itself could feel sacred. The sky seemed to descend toward mountain summits. Storm clouds gathered around peaks. Sunrises appeared dramatic from elevated ground. Stars emerged with exceptional clarity in high, dry environments. Such experiences encouraged the idea that certain landscapes occupied privileged positions between worlds. The evidence survives across continents. Ancient peoples repeatedly chose prominent natural features as ceremonial centers. Some locations were visited for thousands of years. Generations returned to the same ridges, caves, and rock formations long after the original reasons had been forgotten. What survived was tradition, and tradition often pointed upward. One of the most intriguing aspects of prehistoric spirituality is how frequently celestial observation appears linked to communal gatherings. Archaeological sites dating back thousands of years reveal evidence of repeated visits, seasonal ceremonies, and symbolic activity. The precise meanings remain uncertain. Scholars still debate many interpretations, yet a recurring pattern emerges. Human communities often assembled in places where the sky could be observed, celebrated, and integrated into social life. Fire played a central role in these gatherings. Today a campfire may seem ordinary. For most of human history, however, fire occupied an almost magical position within daily existence. It provided warmth, protection, light, and a gathering point. At night, it transformed darkness into a shared social space. People sat around flames and told stories. Those stories frequently involved the stars overhead. The relationship between firelight and starlight may have been more important than modern people realize. Both represented forms of illumination piercing darkness. One was controlled by humans. The other remained beyond human reach. Together they created an atmosphere uniquely suited to storytelling. Around a fire, details of the landscape disappear, attention narrows, faces glow in flickering light. Beyond the immediate circle lies uncertainty. Above stretches the vast celestial canopy. In such settings, stories acquire unusual power. A tale about an ancestor becoming a star feels more believable when the stars themselves are visible overhead. A legend about celestial animals feels more immediate when their constellations can be pointed out directly. Knowledge becomes anchored to experience. This may help explain why oral traditions prove so remarkably durable. The sky itself functioned as a teaching aid. An elder did not need written texts. The stars were already present. A story could unfold while its characters shone above the listeners. Generations learned not only what the stories meant, but where they belonged within the heavens. The result was a powerful system of cultural transmission. Many anthropologists believe this visual reinforcement helped preserve complex knowledge across long periods of time. Stories connected to visible celestial features were easier to remember than abstract information alone. The stars became memory anchors. A constellation triggered a narrative. The narrative preserved knowledge. Knowledge supported survival. The cycle repeated endlessly. Some of the most fascinating evidence for these connections appears in rock art. Across the world, prehistoric peoples carved and painted symbols onto stone surfaces. Many images clearly depict animals, humans, hunting scenes, or geometric designs. Others remain difficult to interpret. Among these mysterious symbols are patterns that some researchers believe may relate to celestial observations. Certain arrangements resemble star clusters. Others align with astronomical events. A few appear positioned in ways suggesting deliberate relationships with the sky. The evidence remains incomplete. No single explanation fully accounts for all examples. Many archaeologists caution against assuming astronomical meanings where simpler explanations may exist. Yet even conservative interpretations acknowledge that prehistoric communities paid close attention to celestial phenomena. The question is not whether ancient people observed the sky. The question is how deeply those observations influenced their cultural lives. Increasingly, evidence suggests the influence was profound. Certain caves provide especially intriguing clues. Deep underground chambers often contain artwork in locations requiring considerable effort to access. Some researchers have proposed that such spaces functioned as ritual environments where stories, ceremonies, and cosmological beliefs were reinforced. The darkness inside these caves created experiences very different from ordinary life. Torches illuminated paintings briefly before shadows reclaimed them. Sound behaved strangely. The outside world disappeared. In such settings, stories about ancestors, spirits, and celestial realms may have acquired extraordinary emotional force. Although direct connections to star myths remain difficult to prove, many scholars suspect that cosmological ideas played important roles in these environments. Humans rarely separate the visible world from the imagined one. The sky, the landscape, and the realm of stories often blend together. This blending became even more significant as communities grew larger and social structures became more complex. Shared stories help unite groups. A common understanding of the heavens could reinforce social identity across generations. People who believed they descended from the same celestial ancestors possessed powerful symbolic bonds. Communities that gathered under the same stars and repeated the same stories strengthened collective memory. The heavens became a source of social cohesion. A sky myth was never only about the sky. It was about belonging. It was about identity. It was about understanding one's place within a larger world. Yet despite their stability, the stars occasionally shared the heavens with phenomena that seemed far less predictable. Most celestial patterns followed familiar rhythms. Then, without warning, a brilliant streak might cross the darkness. A strange glowing object could appear and remain visible for weeks. A wandering light might move differently from every other star. These events challenged expectations. They disrupted the orderly cosmos encoded within generations of stories. And because humans naturally seek meaning in anomalies, such occurrences often inspired some of the most powerful legends of all. The familiar sky was about to reveal its most mysterious inhabitants. For countless generations, the stars behaved exactly as expected. They rose, they crossed the sky, they disappeared, they returned. The reliability of these patterns helped ancient people build stories, calendars, and systems of knowledge. The heavens appeared orderly, predictable, almost eternal. Then something unexpected would happen. A brilliant object would appear where no star had been before. A fiery streak would tear across the darkness. A strange light would wander slowly among the constellations. A glowing tail might hang in the sky for weeks. Such events transformed the familiar heavens into something unsettling. The stars were dependable. These newcomers were not. To modern observers, the distinction is clear. Astronomers understand planets, meteors, comets, novae, and other celestial phenomena through the language of physics. Ancient people possessed no such framework, yet they were exceptionally attentive observers. They recognized immediately when something in the sky behaved differently, and differences demand explanations. Among the earliest mysteries were the wandering lights we now call planets. Unlike ordinary stars, our planets move gradually against the background constellations. Night after night, their positions shift. Sometimes they appear to slow. Occasionally they seem to reverse direction before continuing forward again. To a modern astronomer, these motions arise naturally from orbital mechanics. To an ancient observer, they were extraordinary. Most stars remained fixed relative to one another. The wanderers did not. They seemed alive. They travelled. They behaved according to rules nobody fully understood. The evidence from later historical civilizations suggests that planets often became associated with powerful supernatural beings. Their unusual movements distinguished them from ordinary celestial objects. They acquired personalities, intentions, and divine identities. Although written records from deep prehistory do not survive, scholars suspect that wandering lights likely attracted attention long before formal astronomy emerged. Humans notice anomalies. The planets were anomalies visible to everyone. Venus, in particular, must have been impossible to ignore. Brilliant and unmistakable. It often appears near sunrise or sunset. At times it dominates the twilight sky. Then it disappears entirely before returning months later. This cycle would have seemed mysterious. A luminous object appears. It shines intensely. It vanishes. Then it returns. No wonder so many later cultures associated Venus with powerful myths involving death, rebirth, journeys, and transformation. What survives in the archaeological record suggests that careful observation of Venus eventually became important in several early civilizations. Yet the roots of this fascination may extend far deeper into humanity's relationship with the sky. The wandering planets were not alone. Meteors offered another challenge to celestial order. Most nights, a patient observer might eventually witness a brief streak of light racing across the darkness. During meteor showers, dozens could appear. Today these events are familiar enough that many people make wishes upon them. Ancient reactions were often more serious. A meteor appears suddenly. It moves rapidly. Then it vanishes forever. Its unpredictability made it difficult to integrate into established celestial systems. Stories emerged to explain such events. In some traditions, meteors represented spirits moving between worlds. In others, they signaled messages from supernatural forces. Elsewhere, they were interpreted as warnings, omens, or manifestations of celestial beings. The precise meanings varied enormously. The underlying response remained remarkably consistent. Something unusual happened in the heavens. Therefore, something important must be occurring. This tendency reflects a broader characteristic of human cognition. People naturally assign significance to rare and dramatic events. A predictable sunrise becomes ordinary. A blazing fireball crossing the sky becomes memorable. Memory fuels mythology. The rarer the event, the greater its storytelling potential. Few celestial phenomena illustrate this better than comets. For much of history, comets inspired awe bordering on fear. Unlike meteors, they remained visible for extended periods. Their glowing tails stretched across the heavens. They appeared without warning and often lingered for weeks or months before fading away. To ancient observers, comets seemed to violate the established order of the sky. The stars followed familiar paths. The moon followed familiar phases. Comets ignored expectations. They arrived unexpectedly. They departed mysteriously. Throughout later recorded history, many societies interpreted comets as signs of major change. Rulers feared them. Priests studied them. Ordinary people watched them with fascination and anxiety. Whether similar interpretations existed in much earlier prehistoric periods remains uncertain. The evidence remains incomplete. Yet it would be surprising if such spectacular events failed to influence ancient storytelling. Human beings are narrative creatures. A bright comet practically demands a story. Even more dramatic were the rare celestial events that temporarily transform the appearance of the sun or moon. Today eclipses can be predicted centuries in advance. To ancient observers, they must have been among the most astonishing experiences imaginable. Imagine a familiar world suddenly darkening during the day. The sun begins disappearing. Shadows behave strangely. Animals react. Temperatures change. Then darkness spreads across the landscape. For people lacking scientific explanations, such events could feel profoundly unsettling. The heavens themselves appeared disturbed. Lunar eclipses inspired similar reactions. The moon, usually bright and familiar, could darken or take on a deep reddish hue. The transformation seemed unnatural. Many later cultures developed elaborate explanations involving celestial animals, spirits, monsters, or cosmic struggles. The origins of such stories may lie in reactions reaching far back into prehistory. No single explanation fully accounts for the diversity of eclipse myths. Yet their widespread distribution suggests that rare celestial disruptions consistently captured human imagination. The sky was usually reliable. When reliability failed, meaning rushed to fill the gap, this pattern appears repeatedly throughout human history. Ordinary events establish expectations. Extraordinary events generate myths. In many ways, the first legends about wandering lights, meteors, comets, and eclipses reveal something fundamental about the human mind. People are not satisfied merely observing anomalies. They seek explanations. If an event appears powerful, they assume it matters. If it matters, it becomes part of a story. Over time, these stories accumulate. A meteor becomes a messenger. A planet becomes a traveler. A comet becomes a warning. An eclipse becomes a battle. The heavens grow increasingly populated with meaning. And as societies became larger, more settled, and more socially complex, these meanings acquired new significance. Celestial events no longer influenced only personal beliefs or local traditions. They began affecting leadership, authority, and power itself. The sky was becoming political. Kings, chiefs, priests, and rulers would soon claim special relationships with the heavens. The stars that once guided hunters and inspired storytellers were about to help shape entire civilizations. By the time humans settled into larger communities, the heavens were no longer just a shared environment, they had become a measure of authority. Leaders quickly recognized the power inherent in controlling the interpretation of the sky. Those who could predict the rising and setting of important stars, the appearance of planets, or the timing of eclipses gained prestige. Knowledge of celestial patterns became a form of social capital. Those able to link events on Earth to the heavens' movements claimed insight beyond ordinary mortals. Their words carried authority, their advice guided decisions, and their presence reinforced the impression that the universe itself endorsed their power. The process unfolded in multiple societies independently, across Mesopotamia, Egypt, Mesoamerica, and elsewhere. Ruling classes associated themselves with celestial bodies. Kings were likened to the sun or moon. Priests interpreted the movements of Venus, Jupiter, or Saturn as omens for harvests, battles, or political transitions. Even long before formal calendars, humans began establishing systems in which celestial knowledge bolstered hierarchical structures. What survives in the record suggests that control over the sky's interpretation was as valuable as control over water, land, or trade. Ordinary people internalized these interpretations. The stars became a language that conveyed both cosmic and social order. When a certain constellation appeared at dusk, it might signal a festival, a period of planting, or an ancestral rite. A comet could foreshadow war. The heavens were a guide, but also a tool for shaping obedience and reinforcing societal norms. Through stories, rituals, and observation, the cosmos became intertwined with authority. To question the sky was, indirectly, to question leadership itself. This association also transformed monuments and architecture. Communities constructed structures aligned to celestial events, ensuring that ritual activities and communal observations coincided with significant stars, solstices, or planetary positions. Some alignments were subtle, others precise enough to indicate advanced knowledge of the solar and lunar cycles. Long before written records codified astronomical data, such constructions encoded practical and symbolic knowledge. They reinforced social hierarchies by demonstrating that certain individuals or groups had privileged access to the wisdom of the cosmos. The political and ritual significance of the heavens was enhanced by human imagination. Stories transformed ordinary celestial patterns into elaborate narratives of gods, heroes, and ancestors. Each myth served multiple purposes, explaining natural phenomena, preserving ecological knowledge, and legitimizing human authority. Observing the sky was no longer a private or purely practical activity. It was a communal event, infused with power and meaning. From elevated ceremonial sites, rituals were performed that linked human action to cosmic order, reinforcing the idea that society was synchronized with the movements of the heavens. The intertwining of the celestial and human spheres extended beyond immediate observation. Early calendars based on lunar and solar cycles allowed societies to anticipate seasonal changes, manage agriculture, and plan communal events. Those who mastered this knowledge effectively dictated the rhythm of community life. Over time, the ability to interpret the heavens became both a sacred and pragmatic skill. It validated leaders, guided social cohesion, and encoded survival strategies into stories, monuments, and rituals. The sky, once a distant canvas, had become a tool of governance. Yet even as patterns were exploited for power, the sky retained its mysteries. Comets appeared unpredictably. Meteors blazed across night skies. Planets wandered. Eclipses transformed familiar lights into strange spectacles. These anomalies provided opportunities for interpretation and authority. But they also reminded all observers that despite human ingenuity, the heavens were ultimately vast, uncontrollable, and enigmatic. Even rulers, priests, and astronomers faced a sky that could surprise, challenge, or humble. In this tension between predictable constellations and unpredictable phenomena, the earlier civilizations discovered something profound. They recognized that mastery of the sky was never complete. Knowledge was partial, observation continuous, interpretation flexible. Leaders could claim insight, but anomalies demanded attention, fostering innovation, adaptation, and myth-making. The heavens became a dynamic space, simultaneously a source of power, guidance, wonder, and fear. By linking celestial observation with authority, ancient societies created one of humanity's most enduring cultural structures. Stories, rituals, and monuments anchored in the sky transcended generations, providing continuity and identity. The cosmos was no longer merely background scenery or survival tool. It was a canvas upon which the human imagination, social order, and practical knowledge intersected. These early societies laid the foundation for a world in which the stars would continue to shape belief, politics, and culture for millennia to come. Once the sky became a source of authority, memory, and meaning, people began reshaping the earth itself in response. This was one of the most remarkable developments in human history. For countless generations, stories about the heavens has been carried by voices, knowledge passed from elder to child. Constellations served as visual reminders. Sacred landscapes hosted rituals beneath open skies. Then, gradually, something changed. Human communities began building monuments. Not simply shelters, not merely defensive structures, but places designed, at least in part, to interact with the movements of the heavens. The earth became an instrument for observing the sky. Today, scattered across the world, ancient structures still hint at this transformation. Massive stone circles, earthen mounds, desert alignments, temples oriented toward solstices, passageways illuminated by seasonal sunlight. Some of these monuments were built by societies possessing writing and organized states. Others appeared much earlier. Together they raise a fascinating question. Why did so many ancient peoples invest enormous effort into structures connected with celestial events? The answers are not always clear. Scholars still debate the purpose of many sites. Some alignments may be intentional, others may be coincidental. In certain cases, evidence is compelling. In others, uncertainty remains. Yet the overall pattern is difficult to ignore. Again and again, ancient builders paid attention to the sky. One of the most famous examples comes from prehistoric Europe. Stonehenge stands on an open plain, its massive stones arranged in a formation that continues to inspire fascination and debate. Construction occurred over many centuries. Different generations modified the site. Its exact functions remain uncertain. What is clear, however, is that certain alignments correspond closely with solar events. During the summer solstice, the rising sun appears in a position that interacts dramatically with the monument. This relationship suggests deliberate planning. The builders were not simply stacking stones. They were engaging with celestial cycles. The question is why? Perhaps the site served ceremonial purposes. Perhaps it reinforced social unity. Perhaps it helped track seasonal transitions. Most likely, several functions overlapped. Ancient monuments rarely served only one purpose. The sky connected practical needs, spiritual beliefs, and social identity simultaneously. A monument aligned with the sun could support agriculture, ritual, and communal memory at the same time. Elsewhere, similar patterns emerge. In Ireland, the ancient passage tomb known as Newgrange contains a remarkable feature. Around the winter solstice, sunlight enters a specially designed opening and illuminates the interior chamber. The effect lasts only briefly, yet the precision required is extraordinary. People more than 5,000 years ago constructed a monument capable of interacting with sunlight in a highly specific way. The achievement reminds us that ancient observers were neither careless nor primitive in their understanding of celestial patterns. They watched carefully. They planned patiently. They built for generations. Such projects required more than astronomical knowledge. They required cooperation. Hundreds or even thousands of people may have contributed labor to certain monumental constructions. Communities invested enormous resources into places connected with celestial events. Why? Part of the answer lies in predictability. Agricultural societies depended increasingly on seasonal timing. Planting too early could be disastrous. Planting too late could be equally damaging. Reliable markers became valuable. The heavens provided those markers. Monuments helped formalize them. A particular sunrise position could signal an important moment in the annual cycle. A shadow falling across a specific point could indicate a seasonal transition. Knowledge once transmitted primarily through stories now became embedded within architecture. Stone remembered what people might forget. Yet practical concerns alone do not explain the emotional power of these places. Imagine standing among enormous stones as the sun rises exactly where generations expected it to appear. Imagine gathering with hundreds of others after months of preparation. Imagine witnessing light enter a dark chamber that remains illuminated only during a particular moment each year. Such experiences transform observation into ritual. The sky becomes participatory. People do not merely watch celestial events. They become part of them. This may help explain why ancient monuments often occupy locations already considered sacred. Many were built near older ceremonial landscapes. Some appear connected to ancestral traditions stretching back far before the monuments themselves. The builders were not creating meaning from nothing. They were reinforcing existing relationships between land, memory, and sky. In this sense, monuments became physical expressions of stories. A legend about the sun's journey could be reflected in architectural alignment. A belief about ancestors might shape the placement of tombs. A seasonal ritual could determine the orientation of an entire ceremonial complex. The earth itself became a record of cosmological ideas. And because monuments endure, fragments of those ideas survive today. Yet interpretation remains difficult. Archaeologists can measure alignments. They can analyze construction techniques. They can estimate dates. Recovering beliefs is far harder. The evidence remains incomplete. No single explanation fully accounts for many ancient structures. Popular imagination sometimes fills these gaps with dramatic theories involving lost civilizations, forgotten technologies, or mysterious visitors. Such ideas attract attention because the monuments are undeniably impressive. Yet mainstream archaeology generally finds more convincing explanations in human ingenuity, long-term planning, and cultural motivation. Ancient people did not need extraordinary outside assistance to create extraordinary achievements. They possessed patience. They possessed organization. They possessed deep familiarity with the sky. Perhaps most importantly, they possessed reasons. A monument connected to celestial cycles was not merely an engineering project. It was a statement. It declared that human life belonged within a larger cosmic order. The seasons mattered. The ancestors mattered. The stars mattered. The heavens were woven into daily existence. This worldview appears repeatedly across ancient societies separated by oceans and centuries. Different cultures built different structures, yet many expressed a similar idea. The sky and the earth were connected. Human communities existed between them. For a time, that relationship seemed stable. The stars followed their paths. The monuments mark their cycles. Stories explain their significance. Their nature occasionally reminded people that stability could be fragile. Floods arrived. Volcanoes erupted. Droughts spread. Strange lights appeared in the heavens. The familiar order sometimes broke apart, and when it did, the resulting legends became some of the most powerful stories ever told. The sky was supposed to be dependable. That expectation had been built across countless generations. Stars rose where they were expected. Constellations followed familiar routes. The moon changed shape according to recognizable rhythms. Seasonal markers returned year after year. Human communities learned to trust these patterns. Yet both the heavens and the earth occasionally delivered shocks powerful enough to leave lasting scars on cultural memory. When such events occurred, stories changed. Legends became darker. The sky no longer represented only guidance and order. It also became a source of warning. Many ancient myths contain accounts of great floods, prolonged darkness, falling stars, burning skies, and celestial battles. These stories appear in cultures separated by enormous distances and vast stretches of time. Their details vary dramatically, but certain themes recur with surprising frequency. Something terrible happens. The natural order breaks. Human beings struggle to survive. A new world emerges afterward. For generations, scholars have debated the origins of these narratives. Some myths are clearly symbolic. Others may preserve memories of genuine environmental catastrophes. The challenge lies in determining where observation ends and storytelling begins. The evidence remains incomplete. No single explanation fully accounts for all flood myths, sky legends, or catastrophe traditions. Yet modern archaeology, geology, and climatology increasingly suggest that ancient people witnessed dramatic events capable of inspiring extraordinary stories. Consider floods. Since the end of the last ice age, rising sea levels have transformed coastlines across the globe. Vast areas once occupied by human communities now lie underwater. River systems changed. Shorelines migrated. Entire landscapes disappeared beneath the sea. These transformations did not occur in a single moment. They unfolded over centuries and millennia. Yet for the people experiencing them, the changes could still feel profound. Villages were abandoned. Familiar landmarks vanished. Coastal routes shifted. Oral traditions may have preserved memories of these losses. Anthropologists have documented indigenous stories that appear to describe ancient coastlines submerged thousands of years ago. Scholars continue debating the precise ages and interpretations of such traditions, but they demonstrate something important. Human memory can preserve environmental events for astonishing lengths of time. If landscapes could survive in memory, perhaps celestial phenomena could as well. Volcanic eruptions offer another possibility. A major eruption can transform the appearance of the sky. Ash darkens sunlight. Brilliant sunsets appear. Strange atmospheric effects persist for months. In extreme cases, temperatures fall and harvests suffer. Ancient observers lacking modern scientific explanations would naturally search for meaning in such experiences. The heavens seemed altered. The world felt different. Stories emerged. Some researchers have suggested that certain myths describing darkened skies, vanished suns, or cosmic upheaval may preserve distant echoes of volcanic disasters. Such connections are difficult to prove. Myths evolve over time. Details shift. Symbolism accumulates. Even so, the possibility remains intriguing. Natural events often leave traces not only in geological records but also in cultural memory. Then there are meteors. Most meteors burn harmlessly in the atmosphere. Occasionally, however, larger objects survive. Their arrival can be spectacular. Ancient people undoubtedly witnessed fireballs crossing the sky. Some may have observed meteorite impacts directly. Others likely encountered craters or unusual iron-rich stones associated with celestial origins. These experiences blurred the boundary between heaven and earth. Something literally fell from the sky. A star appeared to descend into the human world. Such events practically invite myth-making. Throughout later history, meteorites were often regarded as sacred objects. Some became ritual artifacts. Others inspired stories about divine intervention or supernatural power. The roots of such beliefs may stretch far back into prehistory. The heavens occasionally seemed capable of touching the earth. That possibility carried enormous symbolic weight. Yet perhaps no celestial event inspired greater fear than eclipses. Unlike floods or volcanic eruptions, eclipses involve familiar celestial bodies behaving unexpectedly. The sun dims. The moon darkens. The normal order of the sky appears disrupted. Even communities accustomed to careful observation could find eclipses unsettling. The sudden transformation of a trusted celestial object demands explanation. Many later traditions responded with stories of celestial predators. Dragons consumed the sun. Monsters attacked the moon. Great cosmic struggles unfolded overhead. People performed rituals, made noise, or conducted ceremonies intended to restore balance. The specific details varied widely. The underlying emotional response often remained similar. The heavens seemed vulnerable. If the sun itself could disappear, what else might happen? This sense of cosmic uncertainty appears repeatedly in ancient catastrophe myths. Order is not guaranteed. The world can change. The sky can surprise. Such themes became especially significant during periods of environmental stress. Archaeological evidence reveals numerous episodes in which droughts, cooling events, floods, volcanic eruptions, or other disruptions affected human societies. Communities adapted, migrated, or collapsed. Their stories adapted as well. Narratives helped people process uncertainty. A catastrophe explained through myth becomes understandable. Not controllable, perhaps, but understandable. This psychological function should not be underestimated. Humans seek meaning during crises. Stories provide structure. A flood becomes a warning. A comet becomes a sign. An eclipse becomes a battle. Chaos acquires narrative form. Importantly, these myths were not necessarily attempts at literal historical documentation. They served broader purposes. They reinforced cultural values. They explained suffering. They connected present experiences with larger cosmological frameworks. Even if a story originated from a real event, centuries of retelling could transform it dramatically. The historical core might remain. The surrounding narrative evolves. This process helps explain why catastrophe myths often contain both recognizable observations and fantastical elements. Reality and symbolism become inseparable. The result is a fascinating mixture of memory, imagination, and cultural adaptation. Some legends may preserve genuine echoes of ancient disasters. Others likely emerge primarily as symbolic narratives. Many combine both influences. Scholars continue investigating these possibilities, comparing myths with archaeological and environmental evidence. The debate remains active because the stakes are significant. Understanding these stories may reveal how ancient people experienced profound environmental change, and profound change was something every society eventually faced. Yet even amid disasters, migrations, and cultural transformations, one remarkable fact remained. The stars themselves endured. Communities disappeared. Languages vanished. Kingdoms rose and fell. The same constellations continued crossing the heavens. Different peoples looked upward and found meaning in the same celestial patterns. The stories changed. The stars remained. And nowhere is this more fascinating than in the astonishing diversity of sky myths created by different civilizations beneath one shared sky. If a traveler could move through time as easily as through space, one of the most surprising discoveries would be how differently human societies interpreted the same stars. The night sky belongs to everyone, yet no culture has ever seen it in exactly the same way. A constellation visible above a desert could become a camel, a hunter, or a spirit. The identical arrangement viewed above an ocean might transform into a canoe, a fish, or an ancestral voyager. The stars themselves remained unchanged. Human imagination did the rest. This diversity reveals one of the most remarkable aspects of the first legends about the sky. They were never simply observations. They were cultural creations. The heavens provided the raw material. Human experience supplied the meaning. Across thousands of years and countless communities, the sky became a mirror reflecting the values, fears, environments, and aspirations of those who gazed upward. Consider the Milky Way. Today it is understood as part of our galaxy, a vast collection of stars stretching across space. Ancient observers had no such framework. They encountered a luminous band arching across the darkness, visible on clear nights as a glowing river of light. What was it? Different cultures offered different answers. Some imagined a celestial road travelled by souls after death. Others envisioned a river flowing through the heavens. Elsewhere it became a pathway for gods, ancestors, or mythical beings. Certain traditions described it as smoke from cosmic fires. Others associated it with birds, serpents, or giant animals moving across the sky. The diversity is extraordinary. Yet beneath that diversity lies a common pattern. Human beings consistently interpreted the unknown through familiar concepts. A society dependent on rivers naturally saw rivers in the sky. Pastoral peoples often imagined celestial herds. Seafaring communities recognized pathways and voyages. The heavens absorbed local experience. In this way, the night sky became culturally personalized while remaining physically universal. One of the most fascinating examples involves the constellation known today as Orion. To modern observers familiar with Western astronomy, Orion appears as a hunter. Yet this interpretation represents only one of many possibilities. Across different cultures, the same star pattern has been associated with warriors, animals, spirits, agricultural figures, and entirely different mythological characters. Some traditions focus on the belt stars. Others emphasize different portions of the constellation altogether. What seems obvious to one culture may be invisible to another. This highlights an important truth about constellations. They are not discovered. They are created. The stars exist independently. The patterns emerge from human perception. This process occurred repeatedly across the world. Communities selected particular stars, connected them in meaningful ways, and embedded those connections within stories. The resulting celestial maps reveal as much about humanity as they do about the heavens. In many regions, sky myths became deeply intertwined with social identity. A group's ancestors might originate among specific stars. A sacred animal could inhabit a constellation. Seasonal ceremonies might correspond to particular celestial events. The sky functioned as a cultural archive. Looking upward became an act of remembering. This role was especially important in societies without writing. Oral traditions rely on memory. Memory benefits from structure. The stars provided an ideal framework. A story attached to a visible constellation could survive for generations because every clear night offered a reminder. The heavens became a memory palace stretching across the cosmos. Anthropologists studying traditional knowledge systems often emphasize this practical dimension. Ancient myths were not random fantasies. They frequently encoded information about geography, ecology, social obligations, and historical experience. The sky helped organize that information. A constellation might indicate when to gather particular foods. Another could signal a migration season. Yet another might reinforce moral teachings or ceremonial responsibilities. Multiple layers of meaning coexisted within a single story. This complexity challenges modern assumptions. People sometimes imagine ancient sky myths as primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. The reality was often far richer. A celestial narrative could simultaneously function as a calendar, educational tool, spiritual tradition, and cultural identity marker. Its value extended far beyond explanation alone. The diversity of these traditions also reminds us that there was never a single ancient understanding of the cosmos. Many modern discussions of mythology focus on major civilizations whose written records survive: Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, China, and other literate societies left extensive evidence. Yet countless other traditions existed. Many were never written down. Some disappeared before outsiders documented them. Others survive only in fragments. The loss is immense. Entire cosmologies have vanished. Stories repeated for centuries may have disappeared within a few generations due to migration, conquest, disease, environmental change, or cultural disruption. What remains is only a portion of humanity's celestial heritage. This realization introduces an element of mystery. How many sky legends have been lost forever? How many unique interpretations of the stars once existed? The evidence remains incomplete. Archaeologists recover artifacts. Anthropologists record surviving traditions. Historians analyze texts. Yet much of humanity's earliest relationship with the heavens remains beyond recovery. The silence itself becomes part of the story. What survives are fragments: a constellation preserved in oral tradition, a carving suggesting celestial symbolism, a monument aligned with a seasonal sunrise, a myth recorded centuries after its origin. Each fragment offers a glimpse into worlds otherwise forgotten. Together they reveal extraordinary creativity. Human communities repeatedly transform the same sky into different narrative landscapes. One shared cosmos produced countless cultural universes, and despite these differences, certain themes appeared again and again. Ancestors among the stars, animals crossing the heavens, celestial journeys, cycles of death and renewal, the search for order within mystery. These recurring motifs suggest that while cultures varied enormously, certain human concerns remained remarkably consistent. People everywhere sought meaning. They sought connection. They sought explanations for their place within a vast and often uncertain world. The stars provided a canvas large enough to hold those questions. Yet understanding exactly how the earliest legends emerged remains one of the greatest challenges facing modern scholars. The stories survived. Their origins often did not, and so the search continues, guided by clues scattered across myths, monuments, artifacts, and the night sky itself. The search for the first legends about the sky often begins with stories. It rarely ends there. Modern researchers approach the mystery from many directions at once. Archaeologists excavate ancient sites. Anthropologists record oral traditions. Astronomers reconstruct ancient skies. Linguists trace the evolution of myths across languages and cultures. Geologists investigate environmental events that may have inspired celestial narratives. Each discipline contributes pieces of a puzzle that remains frustratingly incomplete. The difficulty is obvious. The earliest sky legends emerged long before writing. Stories spoken around fires rarely leave direct archaeological traces. Songs vanish, conversations disappear. Entire generations can pass without leaving behind a single preserved word. Yet people do leave clues, and those clues sometimes survive for astonishing lengths of time. One source of evidence comes from monuments. Ancient structures aligned with celestial events reveal that the sky mattered deeply to their builders. When archaeologists discover repeated orientations towards solstices, equinoxes, lunar cycles, or prominent stars, they gain insights into what communities considered important. The challenge lies in interpretation. A monument can reveal that people paid attention to the heavens. It cannot easily reveal why. Did a solar alignment mark an agricultural season? Did it honor an ancestor? Did it support a religious ceremony? Was it associated with political authority? The answer may involve all of these possibilities simultaneously. Human beliefs rarely fit neatly into modern categories. This uncertainty follows researchers everywhere. Rock art provides another example. Across continents, ancient peoples left images on cave walls, cliffs, and stone surfaces. Some depictions are immediately recognizable. Animals, humans, and hunting scenes appear frequently. Others are far more mysterious. Certain symbols resemble star clusters. Some geometric patterns invite astronomical interpretations. A few researchers have proposed that specific cave paintings preserve celestial knowledge dating back tens of thousands of years. These ideas generate considerable debate. Supporters point to possible alignments between imagery and star patterns. Critics argue that such interpretations sometimes rely too heavily on modern assumptions. The evidence remains incomplete. No single explanation fully accounts for the available data. Yet the debate itself highlights an important reality. Ancient people were sophisticated observers. It would be surprising if the sky played no role in symbolic expression. Determining exactly how large that role was remains difficult. Artifacts present similar challenges. Objects recovered from archaeological sites occasionally contain markings that appear connected to celestial cycles. Some may represent lunar phases, others might relate to seasonal observations. In a few cases, researchers have identified repeating numerical patterns, potentially associated with astronomical phenomena. Again, caution is necessary. Human beings are naturally inclined to find patterns. Not every pattern reflects intentional celestial symbolism, yet some examples are persuasive enough to attract serious scholarly attention. The cumulative effect of these clues is significant. Individually, many pieces of evidence remain ambiguous. Together, they suggest that the heavens occupied a central position in human thought for far longer than written records can reveal. Oral traditions provide another invaluable source of information. For centuries, anthropologists and indigenous knowledge holders have documented stories passed through generations. Many of these traditions contain detailed celestial references. Constellations become animals. Stars become ancestors. The Milky Way becomes a pathway, river, or cosmic boundary. Importantly, these stories often preserve practical information alongside mythology. Seasonal changes, ecological relationships, navigation techniques, and social responsibilities are embedded within narratives. This combination offers an important clue about the origins of sky legends. The first stories were probably not invented purely for entertainment. They served functions. They helped communities survive. They helped people remember. They helped organize knowledge. Modern researchers increasingly recognize this complexity. A myth can be symbolic and practical at the same time. It can explain a celestial event while also reinforcing cultural identity. The distinction between science, religion, and storytelling that dominates modern thinking often did not exist in the same way within traditional societies. Knowledge was integrated. The sky connected everything. One particularly intriguing line of research involves comparative mythology. Scholars compare stories from different cultures searching for shared themes and structures. Sometimes the similarities are striking. Celestial hunters appear in multiple traditions. Cosmic birds recur across continents. Ancestor stars emerge repeatedly. Flood myths and sky catastrophes appear in many regions. Why? The answer remains uncertain. Some similarities may result from common human experiences. People everywhere observe the same moon, stars, and celestial phenomena. Similar observations can inspire similar stories. Other parallels may reflect ancient cultural connections carried through migration and exchange. In some cases, both influences probably operate simultaneously. No single explanation fully accounts for the evidence. Yet the recurring motifs suggest that humanity's relationship with the heavens possesses deep psychological foundations. Certain ideas seem almost inevitable. A bright star invites personification. A celestial pathway invites stories of journeys. An eclipse invites narratives of conflict. Human imagination responds predictably to certain experiences. The sky provides those experiences universally. Advances in astronomy have added fascinating new dimensions to this research. Using sophisticated software, scientists can reconstruct ancient skies with remarkable accuracy. Researchers can determine where stars appeared thousands of years ago, identify past eclipses, and model celestial events visible to ancient observers. Sometimes these reconstructions illuminate old mysteries. A myth describing an unusual celestial phenomenon may correspond with an actual astronomical event. A monument alignment may make sense only when viewed against a prehistoric sky altered by the slow process of axial precession. Such discoveries are exciting because they bridge the gap between story and observation. They remind us that myths did not emerge from empty imagination. They emerged from real encounters with the natural world. Yet despite these advances, profound uncertainties remain. Many stories have been lost. Many sites remain undiscovered. Many interpretations are contested. The first legends about the sky exist largely beyond direct historical reach. Researchers work with fragments of stone, fragments of memory, fragments of stories, fragments of light preserved in human culture. And perhaps that is fitting. The stars themselves reveal only part of their nature to the naked eye. Much remains hidden. The same is true of the legends they inspired. Every new discovery brings greater understanding. It also reveals how much remains unknown. That uncertainty has fueled decades of debate among scholars, some of whom disagree profoundly about how the earliest celestial myths originated and what they truly meant. The deeper researchers investigate the origins of humanity's earlier sky legends, the more they encounter an uncomfortable truth. Many of the most important questions remain unanswered. This uncertainty is not a failure of scholarship. It is a reflection of the immense age of the subject itself. The first stories about the stars were already ancient long before anyone thought to write them down. By the time civilizations began recording myths on clay tablets, papyrus, stone monuments, or bamboo strips, countless generations had already lived and died beneath the night sky. The origins had largely disappeared. Only echoes remained. As a result, scholars often agree on the evidence but disagree about its meaning. One major debate concerns how old some celestial traditions might be. At the cautious end of the spectrum, many researchers argue that most surviving myths cannot be reliably traced beyond the societies that recorded them. Stories change constantly, details evolve, characters merge and separate, cultural influences accumulate over time. From this perspective, attempting to reconstruct extremely ancient star legends involves significant risk. The evidence simply becomes too uncertain. Other scholars take a somewhat broader view. They suggest that certain traditions may preserve elements far older than their recorded versions. Oral cultures can transmit information across remarkable spans of time. Stories adapt, but core structures sometimes endure. Examples from around the world demonstrate that collective memory can survive for thousands of years under the right circumstances. If environmental events, sacred landscapes, or important celestial observations become deeply embedded within cultural identity, portions of those memories may persist across astonishing lengths of time. The debate remains active. Neither position fully resolves the issue. The evidence supports caution. It also supports the possibility of surprising continuity. Another major disagreement involves the purpose of celestial myths themselves. Why were these stories created? One answer emphasizes practical knowledge. According to this view, many sky legends function primarily as memory systems. Stories helped people remember seasonal cycles, ecological relationships, navigation routes, and social responsibilities. The myth served the knowledge. The narrative preserved information. There is considerable evidence supporting this interpretation. Anthropological studies repeatedly demonstrate how oral traditions encode practical observations about the natural world. Yet practical explanations alone rarely feel sufficient. Many celestial stories contain emotional, spiritual, and philosophical dimensions extending far beyond environmental instruction. They explore death. They explore ancestry. They explore creation. They explore humanity's place within the cosmos. For this reason, other researchers emphasize symbolic and religious functions. The stars became vehicles for expressing profound existential concerns. The myth served meaning. Knowledge and spirituality work together. Most scholars today suspect the reality involved both. Ancient stories often performed multiple functions simultaneously. A constellation could mark a season, reinforce cultural identity, and express spiritual beliefs all at once. Modern categories sometimes obscure this complexity. The people creating these stories likely saw no contradiction. The heavens connected practical survival with larger questions about existence. Another fascinating debate centers on recurring similarities between distant cultures. Why do celestial hunters appear in multiple traditions? Why do ancestor stars emerge repeatedly? Why are cosmic birds, celestial serpents, and heavenly pathways so widespread? One explanation involves cultural diffusion. Human populations migrated, traded, and exchanged ideas over vast distances. Certain mythological themes may have spread alongside people themselves. Another explanation focuses on shared human psychology. People everywhere possess similar cognitive tendencies. They recognize patterns. They personify unusual phenomena. They search for agency and meaning. Presented with similar skies, different societies may independently generate similar stories. No single explanation fully accounts for the evidence. Some parallels likely result from ancient cultural connections. Others probably emerged independently. The challenge lies in distinguishing between them. Then there's the question that attracts perhaps the most public fascination. Could some myths preserve memories of real astronomical events? Researchers have proposed connections between legends and eclipses, comets, meteor impacts, supernovae, and other celestial phenomena. In a few cases, the correlations are intriguing. A story describing a bright new star may correspond to a supernova visible in the ancient sky. A legend about darkness during the day might reflect an eclipse or volcanic event. A narrative involving fire from heaven could preserve memories of meteor activity. Yet caution remains essential. Stories evolve. Symbolism accumulates. Historical events become intertwined with religious meaning. Direct connections are often difficult to establish conclusively. The evidence remains incomplete. Still, the possibility continues to inspire investigation. If even a small number of myths preserve observations thousands of years old, They would represent extraordinary examples of cultural memory. The debates do not stop there. Some researchers emphasize astronomy, others emphasize anthropology, some focus on environmental history, others prioritize linguistics or archaeology. Each approach illuminates different aspects of the puzzle. None provides a complete solution, and perhaps none ever will. The first legends about the sky emerged in a world without writing, long before systematic record keeping. Much of that world is gone. Languages vanished. Cultures transformed. Stories disappeared. What survives are fragments, yet those fragments are remarkably rich. Together they reveal a species engaged in one of its oldest intellectual pursuits. Human beings were trying to understand their relationship with the universe. The methods differed from modern science. The questions were often surprisingly similar. What are those lights? Why do they move? Where did we come from? What happens after death? How should we live within a world that is beautiful, dangerous, and mysterious? The stars inspired these questions long before philosophers, theologians, or scientists attempted formal answers. That enduring curiosity may be the most important clue of all. Beneath every myth, every constellation, every celestial ancestor, and every cosmic animal lies a common human experience. Someone looked upward, someone wondered, and someone transformed that wonder into a story. Those stories changed repeatedly across the centuries, yet their influence never disappeared. Even today, modern humanity continues living among the descendants of those ancient legends, often without realizing how deeply they still shape our understanding of the heavens. The first storytellers who looked toward the stars could never have imagined the scale of their legacy. They lived in worlds without observatories, telescopes, satellites, or scientific journals. Their understanding of the cosmos emerged from direct experience. They watched the night sky with naked eyes. They observed patterns. They shared stories. They taught children what their elders had taught them. And somehow, across thousands of years, those stories survived. Not always in their original forms, not always intact, but they survived. The legacy of the earliest sky legends extends far beyond mythology. It reaches into religion, art, architecture, navigation, agriculture, literature, and science itself. In many ways, humanity's modern understanding of the universe grew from the same curiosity that inspired the first constellations. The questions remained, only the methods changed. Ancient communities imagined celestial hunters crossing the heavens. Later civilizations mapped those same stars systematically. Priests tracked planetary movements. Astronomers recorded eclipses. Mathematicians developed predictive models. Generation after generation added new layers of understanding. Yet the emotional foundation remained surprisingly familiar. People still felt awe beneath the stars. One of the most visible examples of this continuity appears in the constellations themselves. Modern star maps contain patterns inherited from ancient traditions. Some originated in Mesopotamia, others were refined by Greek astronomers and transmitted through later cultures. Additional constellations emerge from observations made in different regions of the world. Although scientific astronomy no longer treats constellations as physical realities, their cultural significance remains immense. Human beings continue organizing the heavens into stories. The habit persists. A modern child learning the shape of Orion is participating in a tradition stretching back through countless generations of skywatchers. The scientific explanation differs. The instinct remains the same. This continuity appears throughout human culture. Ancient celestial myths influenced religious traditions across civilizations. Heavenly realms, cosmic journeys, divine lights, and celestial ancestors all left traces within later belief systems. The details evolved. The underlying symbolism endured. The sky remained associated with transcendence. Even today, language reflects these ancient connections. People speak of rising to the heavens. They describe inspiration as something elevated. They associate stars with destiny, memory, hope, and permanence. Such ideas have deep roots. The first legends helped establish conceptual relationships that still shape human thought. Art provides another example. For thousands of years, artists have depicted constellations, celestial animals, cosmic pathways, and heavenly beings. Ancient carvings evolved into illuminated manuscripts, paintings, sculptures, and eventually modern visual media. The imagery changes. The fascination does not. Again and again, humanity returns to the stars. Literature follows a similar pattern. Poets, storytellers, and historians repeatedly draw upon celestial imagery. The night sky serves as a source of metaphor, mystery, and reflection. Ancient myths continue inspiring modern narratives. Sometimes the original stories remain recognizable. Sometimes only faint traces survive. Yet the influence persists. Even science, often presented as the opposite of mythology, inherits part of this legacy. The earliest astronomers emerged from traditions already devoted to observing the heavens. Careful sky watching preceded scientific explanation by many thousands of years. The people who tracked seasonal stars, noticed planetary motions, and remembered celestial cycles laid intellectual foundations that later generations would expand dramatically. Observation came first. Explanation followed. Modern astronomy represents a continuation of humanity's ancient relationship with the sky, rather than a complete departure from it. The questions evolved. The wonder endured. This is perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the story. Human beings now know that stars are distant suns. We understand galaxies, black holes, nebulae, and planetary systems. Spacecraft travel beyond Earth. Telescopes observe objects billions of light-years away. Yet standing beneath a dark sky still evokes feelings familiar to our distant ancestors. The scale remains overwhelming. The mystery remains powerful. Scientific knowledge answers many questions. It also reveals countless new ones. In some respects, modern observers share more with prehistoric skywatchers than they might expect. Both confront a universe larger than themselves. Both seek patterns. Both attempt to understand their place within a vast cosmos. The methods differ. The impulse is ancient. Meanwhile, fragments of the earliest legends continue surviving in unexpected places. Traditional knowledge remains active within many indigenous communities. Ancient constellations appear in modern educational materials. Archaeological discoveries reveal forgotten connections between monuments and celestial events. Researchers uncover new evidence. Old interpretations are reconsidered. The conversation continues. The first legends about the sky are not merely historical artifacts. They remain part of an ongoing human story. Every generation inherits the heavens anew. Every generation interprets them differently. Yet certain experiences remain constant. A clear night, a field, mountain, shoreline, or desert. The sudden appearance of countless stars. The instinctive feeling that the lights above must mean something. That feeling helped create the earliest myths. It inspired monumental architecture. It guided migrations. It shaped religions. It encouraged scientific inquiry. It connected people across continents and millennia. The stars became one of humanity's oldest shared languages, not because everyone told the same stories, but because everyone felt compelled to tell stories at all. And so the legacy of the first stargazers continues. Their names are forgotten. Their voices are silent. Their worlds have vanished. Yet every time someone looks upward and wonders about the light scattered across the darkness, a small part of that ancient tradition survives. The story is never entirely finished. The sky ensures that it cannot be. The night grows quieter now. The fires have burned low, the ceremonies have ended, the monuments stand motionless beneath the stars that inspired them. Across deserts, forests, mountains, coastlines, and plains, generations have come and gone. Languages have vanished. Kingdoms have risen and fallen. Entire cultures have disappeared into the silence of history. Yet above them all the stars remain. For tens of thousands of years, human beings have looked upward and searched for meaning among distant lights. Some saw ancestors, some saw animals, some saw gods, spirits, pathways, or warnings. Others saw calendars, maps, and signs of seasonal change. No single interpretation lasted forever, but the act of looking endured. The sky became humanity's oldest shared inheritance. Long before borders existed, before writing divided history from prehistory, before science transformed our understanding of the cosmos, people stood beneath the same celestial canopy and wondered. That wonder connected them. It still connects us. Today, we know far more about the physical nature of the universe than our ancestors ever could. We understand that stars are immense furnaces of light. We know that galaxies drift through unimaginable distances. We have measured ages, mapped planets, and explored worlds beyond our own. Yet knowledge has not erased mystery. If anything, the universe appears larger and stranger than ever. The first storytellers may not have understood the stars scientifically, but they recognized something important. Looking into the night sky changes the way people think about themselves. It expands the horizon of the mind. It invites questions that have no simple answers. It reminds us that human life, however brief, unfolds within something vast. Perhaps that is why the earliest legends survived so long. Not because they solved the mystery of the stars, because they helped people live with the mystery. And somewhere tonight, under a dark sky untouched by city lights, someone may pause and look upward. They may see the Milky Way stretching across the darkness. They may notice a bright planet near the horizon. They may watch a meteor flash briefly overhead. For a moment, they will share an experience familiar to countless generations stretching deep into prehistory. A silent connection across time. A human being beneath the stars, looking upward, wondering, and listening as people always have for the stories hidden among the lights.